Hey guys, remember the season premiere of Better Call Saul, Season 3, Episode 1, Mabel, and I was definitely really looking forward to this episode. You guys know I absolutely loved last season. I love Season 1 as well, but Season 2 really, I think, is what put the show on the map. We had such a compelling story between everything interesting going on with Jimmy and Chuck, and then Jimmy and Kim. I was very interested in seeing what this season exactly had to offer me after that explosive cliffhanger last season, and damn, I mean, this show is going in a more darker direction than ever. This is by far, I think, the best season premiere the show has done, without a doubt. It was dark, it was realistic, and you can really tell a lot of the things that Jimmy has been able to do really doesn't seem like he's going to be, he's not going to be off the hook with as much anymore. And I think it's interesting the way this episode really does set up the stakes. We definitely are going in a much darker direction for season 3, with Gus Fring and things like that. But let's just get into this episode because I definitely really did love this one. Thought this was a really great return to the show overall. And we get to the beginning, and just like the beginning of season 1, season 2, we start off with a flash forward to Gene. He's at Doldrums, and he wakes up every morning to open the store, preparing the coffee, and, we know those cinnamon rolls ready for consumption. Every day is pretty much the same for him. Basically, even when he unpacks his lunch from a Kansas City Royals lunchbox, he's reading a book in the middle of the mall, and even more evidence shows how Gene has been beaten in submission when he's confronted with a shoplifter running through the mall and trying to evade security before hiding in a booth just a few feet away from him. And when the mall cops come chasing, they find Gene hunkered down on a bench, munching away at his sandwich while trying very hard to stay out of their peripheral vision while looking for the thief. So he's clearly trying to stay out of it as best as he can. And I love it, this whole scene. We got this classical music in the background, just showing how mundane this really is for Gene. Like, this is just kind of a normal day. And when the cops finally confront Gene, without saying a word, he just points to the booth, and they find the thief hiding inside. And Ryan, the shoplifter, seemingly going against everything that Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman stood for. Basically, he's just trying to stay off the radar so no one will ever find him, because he kind of wants to just be an outcast at this point. And instincts are hard to kill. However, as the thief is being pulled away by the cops, Gene then bursts out of his seat. He tells the kid to lawyer up, and it finally seems like Gene is going back to that, persona of either a Saul Goodman or Jimmy McGill. And he finally tells him to lawyer up while everybody involved is looking at him with confusion because he just gave the kid up 3 seconds before offering him legal advice. So they don't really understand where that came from, but he returns to the Cinnabon where he begins slathering on frosting on a fresh batch of cinnamon buns, and when the situation finally overwhelms him, he passes out on the floor with a butter knife full of frosting dabbed on his face. And we don't really know what happens. He's left motionless on the ground, and we're left wondering if this might actually be the end for Gene. It's a very good way to set things up. By doing these flash forwards, yes, they do seem kind of just randomly thrown in, because we only get them once every season, but it really is showing how much Jimmy's life is going to change, and how much he has changed from then till now, and I thought they showed that very well here. I really did love what they did with Gene as a character overall, and I'm definitely interested in seeing where they end up going with him, as these seasons go on. We're definitely, and I think we got a very similar situation right now with Jimmy trying to stay, out of something when he's clearly much more involved with it. We can see that Gene is much more of an outcast, and he's starting to get back to his old habits, and I don't know if that really started to kill him, but I thought that was a good way to start overall, and I'm really interested in seeing how that's really going to connect to the rest of the season, because it always seems like that kind of sets the tone for what the season's going to be like. So, as I did with Season 2, I'm going to do basically what I did the same thing with, for this season, where I'm going to talk about everything that went down with Mike first, and then talk about Jimmy. This might be the last week I do that, though, because his plot is clearly starting to intertwine with Jimmy's. It actually looks like he's going to be the one helping Jimmy next week. So, as we know, we left on this really compelling cliffhanger with Mike last year that he returns to his car to find his horn honking, and he found that note attached to the window that simply said, "Don't." And we don't find out who is the sender of that, but the noise from the car undoubtedly spoiled his attempt to assassinate Hector, but the note didn't get him any indication on who was behind it, much less how they found him in such a remote area. So obviously, this very much kind of annoys him. He really wants to know who this is, and He figures there's no way anybody followed him, so whoever the culprit was behind the note must have put a tracker in his vehicle to know exactly where he was going when setting up the sniper rifle to take out Hector. And he ends up then dismantling the car from engine to tires and everything in between, but he doesn't find any tracker. And it's not until he's waiting for a cab to take him home when Mike actually realizes that whoever was tracking him must be savvy enough to know an ex-Grizzle cop from Philadelphia would have found any of the traditional devices that would have been used in this situation. And the realization washes over him. And I thought that entire scene where he's just dismantling the car from engine to tires, I mean, there's a lot of parts there. It's obviously going to take him a long time to do. And it is a long scene, definitely. I mean, it requires you to pay a lot of attention, but because of how compelling the story is, you can't help but do that. And he ends up waiting for a cab to take him home, and he realizes that whoever was tracking him must be savvy enough to know an ex-Grizzle cop from Philadelphia would have found any of the traditional devices that would have been used in this situation. So he definitely knows that this person is very advanced, and they very much know what they're doing. And the realization washed over him that the person behind this didn't just hide the tracking device, they actually put it in the one place no one would ever think to look, that being the gas cap on his car. And the way that he, found this out, I thought was very, honestly, genius of Mike. I mean, we've known Mike to be a genius, for a while, but he figures that whoever is tracking him placed a device in both of his vehicles, which means that these people are very capable and they're very smart, but now he's got the advantage because he's going to change things up by actually tracking the trackers, which again was very smart of him to do. So he calls in a favor from his veterinarian friend who gets him an identical tracking device so he can switch it out on the gas cap and eventually find out who's been stalking him around town. And he switches out the tracking devices, drains the battery in the one already in the car, and he replaces the cap, and he then sits quietly in the dark while waiting for the people tracking him return to replace the device due to the battery being dead. And the plan actually works to perfection. He's now spots the culprit approach his car, he switch out the tracker while no one's supposed to be looking, and now he has handed back over his own device to the people who were following him, except this time he's actually one who will be tracking them because they will eventually return to the person who ordered the surveillance in the first place. And basically, we know definitely where he's headed. We know definitely Gus is probably the one tracking him. Gus Fring is a main character this season, and I think he definitely is going to be the one involved. But this whole thing was very compelling. It wasn't in the whole episode. There were only a few scenes of it, but it's still, the way they always compare Mike's story to Jimmy's, I think is very well handled. He's got a lot more tampering to do, but I really do like where the story is headed. I'm interested in seeing really where exactly this is going to go, and I overall really did love everything going on in Mike's storyline. Really great stuff this week. So now we'll get to all the craziness in Jimmy's storyline, which, holy shit, I mean, there was a lot going on with Jimmy in this episode. So basically, at the end, we know that Chuck taped that confession from his brother regarding the fraud he committed where Jimmy broke into his house and switched out forms, eventually lost HMM the account with Mesa Verde banks, and we finally get to see how that goes down. The episode begins just seconds later from a different point of view, so clearly Chuck hasn't had any time to enact revenge on his brother, but we all know it's coming one day. So I thought it was interesting to see that he actually didn't get the chance to do that, because when Jimmy returns from telling Hamlin that his partner wasn't retiring or leaving the law behind, he's oblivious to what his brother has just done to him. At this point, he's still trying to repair the fractured relationship with Chuck, so he proceeds to help him take down all the Mylar sheets from the walls, because, we already know that there's already a rift between them from what happened in the penultimate episode, with Chuck. Chuck almost died, as we know, so Jimmy really is trying to, I think, just take any moment he has left with him and just kind of use it to his advantage and just savor that moment. And basically, it's the walls where his brother's trying to encapsulate himself from any further exposure to electricity, and, we know how important this is to Chuck, and in the midst of tearing down the foil-like sheets from the wall, he discovers this book hidden in the brother's library, The Adventures of Mabel, which was a favorite story for bedtime that he always, liked to read, and he enjoys reminiscing about these good old days with his brother, and if only for a second, Chuck has to remind Jimmy that he was the one who read him those stories when they were young, before telling him in no uncertain terms that he's eventually going to pay for what he did by committing forgery and all sorts of other felonious activities. So Chuck he's not going to stop. He will do whatever he can to bring Jimmy down. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, Chuck's a dick, Chuck's a dick. I actually don't really see it that way. I see this as Chuck is finally getting his piece of the cake. I mean, remember what we found out last season. Anytime someone came over to Jimmy's house, or anytime someone went to visit Chuck, it was never for Chuck. It was always for Jimmy. I mean, remember that scene where Chuck had that girl and wasn't really interested in him. She ended up going to Jimmy. All his life, he's always had to live in Jimmy's shadow. Jimmy has always been the better brother. He's always been the one that people like more. He's just more fun. He is much better with presenting things. He's not as serious as his brother is. He is just as meticulous, I'd say, but he just doesn't have the wit that Jimmy does and the fun that Jimmy does. And that's the thing that Jimmy has that appeals to everyone else that Chuck just doesn't really know how to do. And I think this is really Chuck kind of finally getting to play his version of that. He's really starting to play that shady lawyer, and honestly, I think it's kind of going well for Chuck for the most part. I mean, yeah, he is playing that shady lawyer, and we know this is kind of what broke Jimmy. I mean, this is what caused him, as we know, to go on the run in the flash forward, so we know definitely we're paving the way for that. But at the same time, how much longer can this go on? How much can Chuck continue to do all this stuff, and who knows how far this is really going to go. I'm definitely interested in seeing what's actually going to happen with Chuck, how this feud really ends up playing out, because I think Chuck thinks that he really is, in the lead of what's going on, but I'm very interested in seeing what ends up happening there. I think overall, this is a very compelling storyline. I think that where we went with it definitely, like I said, was very rewarding. So Chuck then invites Hamlin over to his house, where he plays for him the tape of Jimmy's confession. And as much as it appalls Howard that Jimmy would do this to his own brother, he still can't quite understand what Chuck actually plans to do with it. I mean, yeah, he taped the evidence. What the hell are you going to do? And legally, the recording was actually made without permission. So that's already going to create a problem for Chuck. So this isn't really in Chuck's favor, which I like. I like that this isn't working 100%. And even if the court allowed him to present his evidence, Jimmy could just present a dozen witnesses claiming the voice in the tape wasn't his, because we know how good Jimmy is with that. I mean, if he has anyone on his side, they will rally for him. They're not going to rally against him. And as much as Chuck wants to believe that he has the high ground, I mean, Jimmy really is the one who's going to win in the end. And add to that, Hamlin knows that even if he played this tape of the folks from Mesa Verde, there's no way the bank will ever do business with HHM again. There's just too much shady stuff that's been going on with them. So there's no way that this is really going to work. So Howard doesn't actually know what Chuck has in store for this tape, which is understandable. I mean, Chuck really hasn't given an answer. So in the end, he ends up inviting his assistant Ernesto over to the house after he does some grocery shopping, including some new batteries for the voice recorder, and he has Ernesto put the batteries back into the recorder, which automatically starts playing Jimmy's confession, and Ernesto only hears it for a moment before Chuck then erupts and tells him to turn it off before laying out a dozen different reasons why he needs to forget what was on that tape. And it's hard to believe that Chuck actually allowed that tape to be played by accident, but instead, he may have just roped another conspirator to get back at Jimmy down the road. This could finally be someone that Chuck maybe has on his side. Then again, if Chuck didn't want Ernesto to hear the tape, maybe his punishment for Jimmy is more self-contained and he wasn't ready to share that information with anybody outside the inner circle. So, yeah, he really did not want Ernesto to have to hear this tape, but it did play Jimmy's confession. So, who knows really where this is going to go? Maybe Chuck has an ally, maybe Ernesto's gonna work with him, maybe he can try to, get Ernesto to turn against Jimmy. I don't really know what Chuck really plans to do here. I think that's really on Chuck's hand. What does Chuck really want to do with all this? And he's clearly gunning for revenge, but how he's going to get it remains to be seen at this point. Because again, as Hamlin told him, this isn't really going to work. You're going to, this is illegal what you did, so obviously, Chuck really doesn't know what he's doing. I think he's trying to get that revenge, but who knows if that actually is going to work out. I'm interested in seeing how that really does go down in the end. But the other stuff going on in this episode had to do with Jimmy and Kim, which I like that these two, for the most part, are still on good terms. I was worried that we were going to see the downfall of their relationship, that, this season would have been him turning into the Saul Goodman persona. And I still believe that's going to happen at the end of the season. Don't get me wrong. I do. But I do want to see as much of this relationship as we can, because it's a very integral part of the show. I mean, it was so important from last season, it still is very important. So Jimmy returns to the office with the fallout with his brother still festering in his mind, and he finds Kim hammering out the details on a will for an elderly customer. And while Jimmy was away dealing with his brother, Kim actually took up a slew of the people who came into the office looking for him. And it's just one more loss that Jimmy has been forced to suffer thanks to Chuck. Again, Chuck basically is trying to ruin his life. I mean, essentially, that's what he's been doing. He's been trying to ruin his life, and if that wasn't enough, once Jimmy actually returns to work full time, he finishes up with a client before returning to the waiting room to get the next one, and he runs into a familiar face. The face belonging to an Air Force captain that he never imagined that he'd see again. And this scene was very interesting, basically. When Jimmy lied his way on Air Force Base last season to film a scene for his commercial with a fake veteran standing next to an iconic warplane, there was a captain who he duped before the camera started rolling. Now, I didn't think much of it. I really didn't. I just kind of thought, oh, he just, kind of lied to that captain, and that's just kind of how it went. But that really does come to finally bite Jimmy in the ass, and it probably is one of the most realistic scenes of this entire episode, which was extremely well done. Because now the commercials are airing on television that Air Force captain has come demanding the footage be taken down, or he's going to report this incident to his superiors. I mean, he now knows that these commercials are fake and that there wasn't actually anything going on. And, Jimmy is trying to slip his way out of the situation. He's fast talking, he's telling him, his version of what actually happened, which is fake, as we know. Jimmy does what he can to try to fabricate this as much as he can, but the Air Force captain fires back at him by threatening to turn him over to the judge to advocate for the military, and that's when he really starts to begin his transformation into Saul. And rather than glad handing the irate Air Force captain, he fires back at him by threatening to expose the fact that he allowed an unauthorized crew onto the base in the first place, which, that was definitely a problem. And to add to his misery, he also says that his crew will gladly lie for him in court and make this Air Force captain not only look like a fool, but if anybody's going to get punished for this infraction of the law, it's probably going to be him, but it definitely won't be the lawyer that he can trust. So, now he's got someone against him, and this scene was extremely well done. I really love the way that Air Force captain came to bite him in the ass, and the way that Jimmy kind of got his way out of it I thought was very interesting, and I definitely really did like that. He's finally snapped when another authoritative figure tries to go for the moral high ground on him, just like Chuck has done for years, and, he's just not going to take it anymore. He really was just waiting to blow his top on someone, and this Air Force captain really was that last straw. After so many people telling him and trying to bring him down and trying to get him back on the right place. He's just tired of it, and he really just wants it all to end. You can understand that. So the Air Force captain really has no chance to survive this without taking the brunt of the penalty. So he actually storms out of the office in anger, realizing that he's kind of outnumbered. So as guilty as threatening the captain made him feel, Jimmy actually quickly transforms back into, his regular demeanor. So I thought that was definitely interesting. He welcomes his next client into the office and is trying to basically go on with his life, try to abandon all the stuff that he does. But this is going to come back. If I know anything about Better Call Saul, this is going to come back to bite Jimmy in the ass. This is going to come back in his face, and it's going to really suck for him. You want this to go well. You really do. You want things to be handled. You want things to go well for Jimmy. You want him to be able to have that, law firm and have this great life with Kim. But it's just inevitable that it's all going to go to shits, and it's really sad to see. But since the beginning of the show, we've known that, and we really do seem like we're starting to get to that place. And as for Kim, she's still choosing to live in the dark about Jimmy's ill-gotten gains that allowed her to take back the Mesa Verde account. And she finally meets with Paige, the Mesa Verde representative, who always wanted to hire her in the first place. Remember her from last season, and she goes over the forms. They prepare to resubmit everything so that the bank can open the new branch in Arizona as expected, and Paige is blown away by Kim's work and the fact that she got the hearing date moved up 3 weeks earlier, and rightfully should be. We remember how hard Kim worked on this stuff last season. So that then when HHM was able to accomplish after blowing the initial meeting in the first place, Paige's adoration actually does feel good. But it also puts a seed of doubt in Kim's mind about making any mistakes that could come back to haunt her the same way it did to Chuck in that hearing. So Kim actually takes back the paperwork so she can double and triple check every single line written, right down the punctuation, because she's not going to crash and burn the same way that Chuck did when he was handling the Mesa Verde account. And that is everything that goes down in this episode. Really great stuff overall, but let's just get in this episode and talk about where I think we're going to go this season. So overall, like I said, this was a really well done premiere. There was a lot of great stuff going on here. Let's first talk about Chuck, because I think it's very interesting where we took Chuck in this episode. Seemed like last season that he had all the evidence, he had everything he could to try to conspire against Jimmy, but as Hamlin just told him, that's not really going to work out in his favor. What he's doing is completely illegal. There was no, he illegally recorded him. He doesn't know about it, and knowing Jimmy, he will be able to rally again a bunch of people against Chuck, and it's really not going to work in Chuck's favor. So the way that Chuck really handles this revenge is really uncertain at this point. I don't really know what Chuck is exactly going to do here. There are a lot of different factors into what he can do, and sure, you can understand why he wants to do it after so many years of living in Jimmy's shadow. You know, he wants to finally try to break him, and I'm pretty sure he is eventually going to succeed at that. But right now, I don't really know how that's all going to go down. How Chuck is really planning on, attacking Jimmy. I don't really know how that's going to happen. So we'll have to see what ends up happening. I think that overall is going to be very interesting. I like that it didn't really work in Chuck's favor. And when Jimmy finds out about this, I don't really know how he's going to react. We'll have to see what happens there. But the whole thing with Jimmy and that Air Force captain was so riveting. I love the way that was done. This is going to come back in Jimmy's face, definitely. I think he thinks that he has the Air Force captain on his side, but I mean, so many people saw the commercial, and the commercial is going to go everywhere. You know, everyone's going to be talking about it. Everyone's going to be, I mean, obviously computers weren't as, technology wasn't, this being 2003, technology wasn't as big as it was then, as it is now, but there still were phones, there still were ways to go around, so the people are going to see the commercial. There are going to be enough people out there who know exactly what Jimmy did, and I think definitely, again, this is not going to work well for Jimmy because of the commercial. So I think definitely that Air Force captain is going to come back and play somehow. We'll have to see the way that turns out. I like that Kim was able to get this deal. It actually did seem to go well for her, and, basically, she actually, double-checked everything just to make sure that there wasn't anything she signed wrong. I thought that was definitely very smart of her. You can really tell that this is a very tenuous position, and she wants it to last as long as it possibly can. She doesn't want Jimmy to try to infiltrate or get involved or anything like that. I think she still knows that being with Jimmy is a very dangerous situation, but she still kind of puts up with it because I think in reality, she really does love Jimmy. But at the same time, I don't really know where that whole thing is going to go. I really do love Jimmy and Kim together, I do. But again, this relationship is just, prepared to downfall. I definitely know that's probably going to happen very soon. So we'll have to see where that's going to go. I think that whole thing is going to be very interesting. And then the only other thing to really talk about is Mike. As we know, Mike now knows, that something is going on. He's trying to basically track the tracker. It seems that he's actually been successful at that. And we know most likely this is Gus Fring that is trying to, basically trying to steer him away from killing Hector. So it's definitely not Mike that puts Hector in the wheelchair. I don't think it's going to be Mike. I still think it's probably Nacho. We know that Nacho has not appeared in this episode. I don't know if he's going to be in future episodes. I didn't think he was going to be in last season either, but I'm sure he'll find his way into this season. He's still an important part of the show. But does Nacho have connections to Gus Fring? How is that really all going to go down? I don't really know how Gus Fring knows Mike or what's really going to happen there. I think that whole thing's going to be very interesting. And that's partly my fault because I didn't watch Breaking Bad. I didn't. And sure, I probably should have done my homework a long time ago, but I haven't. I apologize for that. And yeah, so that's a whole other story. I've not seen Breaking Bad if you guys didn't know. If you guys are wondering, no, I have not seen it. So that's my fault. That's not the fault of the show. Overall, guys, was also, the one other thing to talk about is the Gene flashback. I thought was very well done because it's really showing how Jimmy, how dedicated Jimmy is to being a lawyer and how he is so terrified of what's going down. We know eventually Jimmy is going to hide out, and it really seems like he's about to be exposed for what he did, and who knows, what's actually going to happen there. I think that whole thing with Gene is very interesting. I don't know if we're going to see more Gene flash forwards. I'm pretty sure they're only going to show him in premieres, but I don't really know at this point. But overall, guys, it was a really great premiere. I really did love this episode overall. And I'm definitely going to give Better Call Saul Season 3, Episode 1, Mabel, the season premiere, a 4.5 out of 5 or an A-. So, guys, maybe this episode of Better Call Saul. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall. Left your thoughts in it. I really did love this premiere overall. So happy to see the show is back and so ready to talk to you guys about it again. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be, I think, for tonight's episode of The Americans. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.